and never give up.
Welcome everyone, and welcome back to the vault for another edition of Storytime. You have come to the vault, hidden deep underground, where it is safe. You can forget about all the worries and stresses up there on the surface and relax and just focus on this story time. Before we get into today's story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any future story times. Today's story takes us to West Virginia for a very scary and violent story. So scary that a family and a family friend had to move for fear of their life. Go and get yourself a blanket to hide under. Get a warm drink. Sit down and relax. This is the story of Bigfoot terrorizing West Virginia. In 2013, a family decided to move to the mountains of West Virginia, about 4 miles from Plum Orchard Lake. They found their perfect little cabin nestled in the mountains on 10 acres, with a small creek that ran through the property. Behind their property was thousands of acres of state-owned land that were full of rugged beauty. The first few weeks went by without incident, and they greatly enjoyed their new life. In that area of the United States, seasons changed faster than their home state of Georgia. They noticed more and more wildlife getting closer to their house and around the creek. One of their friends came up to visit and fell in love with the property. He enjoyed it so much that they ended up letting him put a tiny house at the bottom of the property in a clearing with a great view of the creek about 50 yards from the main house. He ended up coming to work with the father of the family, and they rode together every morning. About a month after he moved to the property, the two men came home late one evening, pulled into the driveway and got out, only to hear the strangest noises coming from the ridge above the house. It sounded like something was pacing the ridge and making a loud blowing noise. They sat and listened for a few minutes. They thought it was strange, but they parted ways and went about their separate evening routines. Next morning, the father picked up his friend like usual, but he seemed shaken and extremely exhausted. He asked him what was the matter, and he said that tree limbs and stones kept hitting the side of his small house throughout the night. He seemed sincerely horrified. A few days went by, and the wife said that she had an uneasy feeling while being outside, almost like she was being watched by something. She also said something was knocking things over in the yard. The father began to suspect that it was a bear, as the area had such a high population of them. Later that year, they started getting their first snowfall around Halloween, something that they were not prepared for, being from the south. They spent a lot of the next evening chopping logs at the very back of the property for firewood. While they were back there, they noticed what they thought were game trails down behind the house, which you could follow all the way to the creek. They thought nothing of it and continued collecting wood. That night, they started hearing something hitting their house. At first it sounded like small stones, but then transitioned into what sounded like much larger rocks. They called their friend to see if he was messing around, but down the receiver they could hear the same noise of stones hitting the top of his house as well. They decided to see what was going on and to meet one another on the porch. Both men had rifles, and both men took their pit bulls. They grabbed their flashlights and headed towards the ridge. The dogs seemed extremely anxious. They were acting like something was close, but they couldn't see anything. All they found was a terrible odor and some disturbed stones around the house. Thanksgiving came and went, and Christmas was fast approaching. All the strange activity seemed to die down for a few weeks. That is, until the friend got into the work van one morning and seemed completely freaked out. He said he had spent the entire night with his gun in his lap and his dog growling and watching the front door. He asked if they had heard anything the night before, and they explained that they had slept like babies. He went on to stress that something was messing with his front door, and he said he was honestly scared to death. That weekend was like any other. The family spent much of the time watching movies before heading to bed around 10:30. Suddenly, they were awoken at 2 a.m. by an alarming sound. Boom, boom, boom. It sounded like something was hitting the side of the house with a 2x4. The kids and the wife were crying, and they all fled in to the parents' bedroom. They called their friend, and he said that he could hear the sound from his place. They could hear his dog snarling in the background. They decided to get guns and head outside to see what was going on. The friend ran up to the house and they set off into the woods. Their dog was growling towards the tree line, so they headed in that direction. As they got closer, the dog seemed afraid of something. They kept yelling out, "Who's there?" The dogs then started barking loudly towards the trees next to them, and they shined their lights in that direction. That's when they saw it. Both men were over 6'2", and this had to be at least 8'8" or taller. His hair was dark and matted, and when the light hit his eyes, they shined red. It was only there for a second, but time froze, and we absorbed every detail of the moment. It then stepped back into the thicket of the woods behind it. The world became alive again, and fear set in. The friend was screaming, "Did you see that? Did you fucking see that? What the fuck was that?" He said. "I don't know, man," said the father, and the urge to flee from the area quickly set in. They ran back down to the property, and something yelled out towards them, a roar unlike anything they had ever heard before. There was also a sound of pacing on the ridge. They both went into the house, locked the doors, and sat with the family till morning. The next day, the friend decided to move, and the family left in the spring, never to look back. We hope you've enjoyed that scary story time, and that you can join us here in the vault for the next story time. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here in the vault, the whole team send their love and thoughts to all the people of Ukraine and all the countries that are showing support and aid. More than ever, this is the time to look after each other and keep each other safe. See you next time. Good night.